And I'll call this meeting of the City of Urbana Public Television Commission to order on Friday, September 9th at 12:10 p.m. Would the clerk call the roll?
Commissioner Peter Folk.
Present.
Commissioner John Gutzmer.
Present.
Commissioner Mark Schultz.
Present.
Commissioner Marie Polk is not here, and Commissioner Sarah Bennett sends her regrets. She is unable to make it today.
Does that mean we do or do not have a quorum?
I believe we do not have a quorum. We have three out of 5, so I guess we do have a quorum technically, but some things require, no. Our parliamentarian says that we need 4, so we do not have a quorum.
Okay.
Thank you, parliamentarian.
So we have to have a majority of the total seats, not the filled seats, is that right? Okay. Well, without a quorum, we cannot do anything like our super interesting approval of minutes, but those will have to go unapproved. But I believe we can, since it is a public meeting, air our grievances about all things, and specifically not grievance related, but I believe Sanford has some stuff he'd like to discuss.
Right. Well, let's continue just down the agenda, but you're right. We
Okay.
can definitely have a productive conversation. So,
Okay. Correspondence, did we have any correspondence?
we did receive the correspondence from Commissioner Bennett that she would not be able to make it. But also, this ties into a little bit of the purpose of the UPTV Commission. The City of Urbana's Cable Commission was turned off, so to speak, a few years ago, and this UPTV Commission absorbed one of the responsibilities of that, which was to help with complaints against the cable providers. So we actually did have correspondence related to a complaint. It was a specific person had a refund clarification. We communicated with Comcast, made sure that those people were talking, and the item was resolved. So there was an incident of that came up, and staff addressed it.
Cool, great. Staff report.
One of the items in the packet that I wanted to share with everybody and just kind of brief you on is upcoming upgrades to this specific area we're sitting in right now. And I put a copy of the memo that we presented to council. So let me kind of give some of the background and just talk about it for a moment. When we moved back to in-person meetings in April, it was a difficult process for staff because we had new staff who were not familiar with the equipment. We also had more equipment issues than we expected. Some of our analog equipment was sort of degrading. We also had problems trying to integrate electronic meetings, which people had gotten used to through the pandemic on Zoom, with the current equipment. So we did our best, and we have reached a point where we are delivering the meetings through UPTV, but the quality is not wonderful. The audio quality is a problem. We have a consistently sort of a scratchiness, a noise level in the audio. We've also had some issues with the live streaming. So we began a process. Soon after we started doing this, we realized this wasn't going to work. So we met in here. We tried to adjust levels. We tried to do everything we could do to solve it ourselves, and sort of realized it was needed to be resolved. We had budget in future years. One of them was in the current year, and one of them was like 2 years away to replace some equipment. So we worked with our finance department, and we did a budget amendment. We moved some equipment up in the replacement cycle. We conducted a discussion with a vendor. We were able to identify a good list of changes that we wanted to do. They are providing the items, they're providing the service to install it, they're providing a year of support. We went through a procurement process, and we signed a contract at the end of July. So that work is going to happen in 2 phases. This month, September, at the end of the month, we're going to do one set of work, which will replace some of the video equipment Unfortunately, due to shipping delays, some of the audio equipment won't be in until December. So there'll be a second piece of work in December.
And the
So-
meetings in the meantime will just be silent?
Well, they'll have that poor audio, unfortunately. But we do hope that some of the work in September will improve the live stream. So we've had some problems where the live stream would drop off. So anyway, bottom line is we're going to have better gear professionally installed in place realistically by the end of the 2022 calendar year is the timeline. So that was my memo and my presentation to council, because there have been complaints from the community about the quality of the broadcast. Just one other note is that we will have more of an ability to present a high definition broadcast, at least the live stream. Needless to say, the UPTV 6 or the cable stations that are standard def will not be able to take advantage of that. But I do hope that we'll at least improve the ability of us to do the live stream.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's coming. We're excited. It is scheduled for the end of September for the first piece of work.
Okay. Is that the entirety of the staff report?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. I didn't mean to, say that wasn't enough, just, just making sure. We do actually have 2 people in the audience today, which is super exciting, and we would like to invite them if they would like to participate to say a few words. Nope. All right. Unfinished business includes the discussion of UPTV's focus moving forward. And I'll ask Sanford to kind of run through the stuff that he wanted to cover.
So this is a continuing discussion, and I'm a person who sometimes thinks by writing. So I wrote a memo just to kind of get my thoughts together. So I'm just going to summarize the memo that I sent, and we'll talk about kind of what we're envisioning. The first part of this is really grappling with this idea that UPTV was designed in a time where people needed a place to go to get something on television. So if you wanted to make a video, if you wanted to record a show, if you wanted to Mark in the Park, any of these kinds of efforts required cameras, video equipment, editing equipment to get that content produced. And then you fast forward to where we are today, and your phone has the ability to do all those things. And what is the purpose of UPTV in a world where anybody can do these things on their own? And that's kind of the bigger picture thing that I've been grappling with is what do we want to be? What does UPTV want to continue to be? And where I keep winding up is going back to the original mission of UPTV is that we are about community produced content. And the public, embracing the public access side. During the pandemic especially, we focused way more on the governmental side of the PEG. The PEG standing for public access, that's the P, education, and government. And we really focused on the government side with these Zoom meetings and everything else, and kind of everything else fell away. I would like to see us go back to the other 2 letters. So the public access side and the education side. And the education side, to me, is kind of, that's another topic to get into, which is how can we go back towards, having content being produced from high school students, and how can we go back to engaging teachers and bringing, that's a whole nother thing for another day. But from a public access perspective, my goal here is to figure out a way for us to collect community produced content, put it on UPTV, and that's really, that's it. That I see us being that conduit for people who are already producing something that maybe they're streaming it, or maybe they're putting it on one of the online services, but we want to be that place where they can also have their content shown. So we talked about this in prior meetings, and one of the, I'm just trying to make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. So one of the things that came out from the prior meeting was this idea of having kind of a one-pager. So I threw together a one-pager and put that in the packet as well as a draft document. And I'm not going to read it or anything, but I'll just tell you the high-level sections of it. You know, first of all, what is UPTV? And just kind of telling people, hey, this is how we see ourselves. A middle part that says, what is different now for UPTV, to get that idea across that says we want to change with the times, and making that pitch for people to then submit content to be presented. Now, there's a whole nother step in the process, which is reviewing the content, because we have UPTV policies and procedures, and we need to make sure that our content is adhering to them before we put it on the air. So one of the, and this is now more in the weeds and not part of the commission, but we're playing with some setup of online service where people can submit their content as a video file, and then we could have maybe several volunteers who choose to volunteer to UPTV by reviewing content as opposed to producing content. And those volunteers would then watch the videos that have been submitted. And the main criteria that we're looking for is, does it adhere to our minimum policies for what we'll show? Because there are some prohibited items. And then second of all, is it something we would need to show after hours during adult programming, or could it be shown at any time? So there'd be kind of a vetting process to make sure that the content's suitable, and then staff would slot it, so to speak, into the schedule. So I'm putting all that out here as part of this ongoing discussion and looking for feedback.
Go for it.
I thank you for that memo. It's a lot to reflect on and a lot to ruminate on, and I appreciate it. I think the education component is that strikes a chord with me. When I was in junior high and high school, my dream was to be, for lack of a better term, Joe Buck. If there was a World Series, I was going to announce it. If there was going to be a football game, I was going to announce it. If there was going to be a news report, I was going to be Walter Cronkite. My dream was to become a broadcaster. And I was able to live that dream for 16 years. If I would have been in high school and known that an outlet like UPTV existed, oh my goodness, I would have been thrilled. You mean I get a chance to do play-by-play of my high school basketball team? I get to do like a weekly news wrap-up of what's going on in the school? I would love it. I know the devil is in the details, and one year you may have very dedicated people, and the next year you may not have dedicated people. But if we can partner with the school district in getting those who are comfortable with public speaking, those who want to learn more about video production, it's more than just shooting something with your phone. That, I think, would be a very rich ground to work. So those are my thoughts as we move forward. All the other aspects are good too, but when you talked about the education, I thought, wow, if that would have been around when I was in high school, I would have lived here.
Any thoughts?
So I think you mentioned submitting video files. Would there also be, I know a lot of people's content they create it never exists in a video file. It's just kind of moved straight to the cloud. Would there be an option to just provide a link to like a YouTube or Facebook Live? Okay. And then the other thing, I think there's already a dearth of public comment. So this would be kind of like featured content of UPTV after hours. Like if I've kind of been working on like Urbana-centric YouTube channel, like that might be something that we could bring in and play on the UPTV stream to the cable providers.
Right. I mean, in a lot of these cases, and again, I think this is just more about acknowledging where we are in the world. We'd be re-showing content that's already been shown on Facebook Live, or people have produced and posted on YouTube or whatever. It's just, it goes back to the sort of mission of UPTV to celebrate what's going on in our community. So yeah, my attitude is we would cast a wide net and not restrict anything.
Great.
As long as it meets our policies and procedures for what we show on the air.
Sure. And on the education side, let me check. I know we have one teacher at the middle school. I don't think he's gotten things up and running this year yet, but I know that they do some internal video productions at the middle school, but I can check with him and see if that's something that they would like to be featured on UPTV as well.
So I have a few thoughts. One is that, I mean, the modern day equivalent of Walter Cronkite is some YouTube influencer, and that is very much a, what people want to be at a certain age or at a variety of times. Everybody is jealous of the fame that they have, even if it's only for 15 minutes. And that kind of thought came up a few times in hearing Sanford talk, but also in hearing you talk, that so if we were intending to syndicate some other person's content that they produced, we would need to recognize that people today who are putting that stuff out on YouTube, some of them are doing it with a profit in mind, that they are trying to get more views and more clicks, and we need to think about how our interaction with that content would either work with their goals, or at least not. Like, we wouldn't, if we took their video and put it on our YouTube channel, that we wouldn't want that to negatively impact their revenue stream, because that otherwise, if it did, they wouldn't want us to do it. So we would need to think through the pathways that people are already using to share that content, and make sure that ours was another source for eyeballs instead of subtracting from eyeballs. And I will say that I have been, for years, many of the years that I've been on this commission, I have brought up that I would really like to see some sort of the equivalent of an RSS feed that I could watch all of the public content. I can now watch everything that's on the YouTube channel, on the UPTV YouTube channel, and that is a subset of the locally produced content. I don't want to watch every governmental meeting, but there are a lot of the community produced shows that are now listed there. I would love for a more robust, I don't have to watch them all, but I would like to see everything that is produced locally, and have the option of I don't know, having that be part of the list of things that I view. And I do think that would be a very valuable thing for this channel to do. It's the equivalent of, as you said, being the place that people come to produce it. They don't need to come here to produce it anymore. They can produce it on their own, for whatever the definition of produce these days. That sometimes the production is pretty minimal, but the cameras are so good that you may not need that anymore. So I'm all for most of the things that you suggested. I think we need to probably talk about how it would fit into the rest of the ecosystem.
Those are good points, particularly YouTube's, I mean, just using it as it's obviously not the only place to store videos, but it's one we already use heavily, and it's, like you said, it's used by others. Something that we can really credit Jason with was the playlists. So, having shows that have their individual playlists, or having potentially playlists of community content, where we could direct eyeballs to that existing location where those people may, and we'd have to read our bylaws about monetized content and stuff like that. But I just, I think that there's a solution here, in some way to sort of be that umbrella organization that can direct people to the content. But really what I'm much more focused on is the replaying of the content on our
channel.
on our channel.
Yeah.
Which, obviously if somebody has monetized YouTube content and we show it on UPTV, they're going to make zero because, that doesn't count.
Right.
But maybe we can get them more publicity, right? And then maybe they can help that drive their viewership or whatever.
So maybe the key to that is make sure that there's an easy way for people to get from watching it on TV to clicking on the appropriate link.
Yeah. Just don't click on your screen.
Unless it's one that allows you to do that.
Yeah,
I suppose.
okay.
I
Yeah.
suppose.
My sense is that the people who are making any substantive amount of money from YouTube are not going to be the same people who are requesting to have their content featured on UPTV. Once you're kind of at that level, I think you're probably on your own kind of track.
Yes, I definitely agree that in reality that's the people who are, I guess I'll say that the people who are on that track probably are not that interested in having their stuff played on UPTV. However, the people who would like to be on that track would not want to diminish their, they wouldn't want to, people are often not super logical about their opportunities, and we wouldn't want it to get in the way of we would want it to help them instead of hurt them.
Sure.
It's really
And I think as long as it was clear in the fine print, like
Yeah.
this will be streamed, this won't get additional views, I think a lot of people would be fine with that.
Okay, well, I will leave it at, I welcome input on this sort of one-pager, because the goal is to have a document that we can share with people and kind of communicate this. Just to close out this discussion, big picture timelines. We have traditionally had a UPTV producers meeting in December. And, I think we still have enough time to sort of stand up an infrastructure for this, get our messaging together, and, present something, and hopefully have another producers meeting in December, which we haven't had in a couple of years due to the pandemic. But, maybe we can do something like that and start to, re-engage some of the community members who, used to produce shows and maybe want to come back, or maybe want to do their shows in a different way. So it's an exciting opportunity. The timing is good because we can use December to focus our efforts. So I just want to put that out there, that's my goal, is to get something fully put together so we can push it out. I mean, working backwards, by November, we want to have something that we can present out and start to engage people with.
And you've begun looking at software platforms for that, is that what I understood?
Yeah, I found one due to something that I was doing outside of my work that we're testing, and I set up Mark with a testing account, and I put some fake content out there. So we'll kind of figure out what that looks like. I want to get it to the point where we can give people a little, here's what it looks like, demonstration.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that kind of the balance of that discussion? Okay. Next item of business is a new business, UPTV content archives.
So this is sort of the other half of the memo that I wrote out there, and it ties into this idea that we're going to be asking people to present us with content, and we have a lot of content from the past already. this one is a more open-ended discussion, and I'm going to be looking for ideas and assistance in moving it forward. But I think there's a role here for other groups to help us with this archival process, because, you know, what I hope that people will be able to do is say, wow, UPTV captured what was going on in the community of Urbana, you know, in the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s, and hopefully moving forward. But there's a real treasure trove of stuff that people have produced that really represents the community. And I'm much more focused on community-produced content than content that was produced somewhere else and shown on UPTV. We need help in organizing that. And there are people in this town, and I kind of listed a few groups in my memo. One of them is the library, one of them is the university's iSchool, who could potentially provide us with some collaborative efforts, I'll just leave it at that, of ways to organize that. And UPTV staff could start to take content, and one of my concerns, for example, is a lot of our content's on DVDs, and DVDs are starting to degrade. So, you know, there is a little bit of a race against time to capture some of this we also have VHS tapes in some cases. So we want to capture this content before it, you know, it's no longer accessible.
So I know that the News Gazette has given its archives to the library in some form. I don't know if they're fully transferred, or if, I don't know if the library has ownership of them or some other relationship with that content. But I know that they have taken kind of, it's part of their mission to get that content recorded and into the accessible things that the library has. I would definitely imagine that this is a similar kind of thing, and hopefully would be somewhat easier, but I mean, there's still a manual component there.
Right.
So,
and, you know, I would be willing, and we have some capacity on UPTV with our, for example, the people who are our camera operators. You know, we could have some capacity to have them do some of this as paid work, but I really think that we need assistance in figuring out a strategy. You know, just simply putting a DVD in a machine and, you know, pulling the video file off of it is a relatively straightforward process, but organizing and tagging and assembling this into an archive is where I think we need some guidance. And so that's my new business.
okay.
Have you thought of or reached out to like the Champaign County Historical Society? There's also a museum group a coworker is a part of. I could email you their contact, because I think people in charge of museums, this is their 40-hour-a-week job, is archiving things. So I think they might be of a help to you as well. Again, it's a question too, like you mentioned, if we give that to them, is it now their property? May we still have it when it's done, please? But I think they definitely would be able to develop a strategy of reviewing the content and saying, you know, put this in this bin and this in that bin and put this in the wastebasket. So, yeah.
Any thoughts?
What's the volume of content you're talking about? You mentioned DVDs and VHS tapes.
Hundreds of DVDs, thousands, maybe, and terabytes of video files. So we're going to start doing some proactive reviewing, but at some point there's decades of content here, and I just want to make sure the things that has cultural value to the community are properly kept. So.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my question too. So it seems to me that probably one of the first steps would be to figure out what the volume is, and then you can, like, is there some library sciences class at the U of I with 400 people in it that you could, every year each person could be responsible for archiving something? I
Yeah.
don't know, something.
Well, and like I said, I mean, I wouldn't even necessarily be looking for somebody else to do the archiving of the content, more to help us plan how it should be structured and maintained, strategize. And then it could be an ongoing, task that we do have, people doing who are part of UPTV staff. So I'm not necessarily, I don't know. I mean, again, that would be up to different groups. If someone said, hey, we've got a class of 40 people and they'll all take 10 DVDs each, I'd say, great, awesome, that's wonderful. But, if we just only got as far as somebody helping us come up with a good process, and then we know that our staff will do it over the next couple of years, that's okay,
Okay. That seems like a much more tractable ask
Yeah.
from somebody like the library. I mean,
Yeah.
I would think they'd kind of already know what they're, like, it'd be obvious to them, whereas to us, it's a whole question.
Yeah, and, I mean, we have a bunch of technology people up here on this commission, so, I mean, I'll just say that, the storage issue is less and less of an issue. It's more about accessibility and, it's not physically where is it stored, it's more how is, how would people access it if they wanted to? How would you search it? How would you, get at information? It's easier and easier to think about how are we going to store a couple of terabytes of videos.
Yeah, my back of the napkin, even if it's 1,000 DVDs, that's still a rather modest hard drive.
Single hard drive.
Single hard drive.
Yeah.
But so you're planning on, so on the flip side, you're planning on having this available through the web somewhere where people could access and.
That's the dream, right? I mean, I would think. In the same way, I'm going to go with the News Gazette archive. I mean, I believe the library's goal is to make more and more of that searchable and accessible directly by the community. Or it could be something, again, sort of the same analogy. I think they did this with the Chanute Air Force Base. Maybe it's something you have to go into the art library and deal with the special collections people. But, in my dream scenario, yeah, somebody comes in and says, hey, I'd like to find any videos that were done in Urbana downtown in the 1992 to 1996 range.
That's so cool.
And we could, and we would say, oh, well, we have these 14 shows that were shot, Here's the 1995 Sweet Corn Festival, stuff like that.
Sure.
But this is me, without necessarily dealing with the constraints of time, money, and, resources. Just me wishing and thinking about what do we want to leave for the people who come along in 20 or 30 years. What do we want to leave them from UPTV?
Well, I mean, I think that's very cool. I definitely, that would be a really cool resource. So.
Good.
Item B was refining the purpose of the UPTV Commission. And two sub-items there that you want to cover them?
So this goes back to, me having to be staff for these commission meetings and looking at what we've done in the past and, how much of it we really, what do we want to do? So one thing that we used to do is provide purchase reports of what we bought. I did, and I attached into the packet the sort of council, the city code that defines the UPTV Commission. This is one of those things that there's no requirement for us to do it. We have done it, and it's not a bad thing, but it's one more thing that we have to pull out of the invoices that we pay and put in a spreadsheet and pull it together, and then we show it to you and say, here's stuff we bought.
And we're like, great.
Yeah, and you say, good job, thank you. I'd like to propose that we don't do this anymore. Happy to answer questions about how we're spending the money, but it's just a task that somebody has to do that isn't required. It's nice, but it's not required.
City council provides the financial check and balance to that?
I mean, at a higher level, yes, but no one is really reviewing the reports. So just, there is, I would say more than anything, the check and balance is the city's finance department more than city council. When we head into the beginning of a year, we project what equipment we're going to replace based on, you know, when we bought it and when it's up for, renewal, projected life. We will continue to do those, and there is a mandatory part of the, it wasn't in the city council, but it was in the policies and procedures or whatever the UPTV commission defined, that you wanted to have budget reports. So we will tell you, this is what we plan to buy. But then during the year, we make miscellaneous purchases as needed. You know, whether it's a mic stand that got broken, or, you know, oh, this tripod was really rolling out, and so we bought a new one. Or like we did in June, we replaced a number of cameras. So, you know, Ibrahim did a great job. He went out, he found some really nice stuff, and we were able to buy, I think it was a couple of cameras and some miscellaneous parts for them.
That might be good for a staff report saying, hey, we bought some new cameras. I don't need to go through your financial line by line and audit and say, well, you bought it here, you could have bought it there for $10 cheaper. I criticize you. I don't need that.
Okay.
Personally, as a commissioner.
Would you be acceptable if we used our judgment? For example, hey, we had to replace a battery pack versus we bought some cameras.
Yes.
Like I'd throw a vague threshold of like $100 or $200, and you don't care about low-level stuff we buy.
No.
I don't care about microphone covers, and yeah, it's still going through the municipal purchasing process with all the regular PO approvals. That's good enough for me.
Okay.
It seems like it's a layer of work for you that is not necessary. And in my opinion, you don't need to do it for us on our account.
The only things that I would think would make sense to continue bringing, I'm 100% fine with the city's purchasing, you know, processes being the checks and balances and making sure that that's well spent. But to the extent that the items you buy would impact UPTV production, like the things you mentioned today, where, you know, we're gonna be more able to do higher definition streams and things like that. And also, especially when it impacts, to the extent that that UPTV is still doing community production and still serving as like a library where you can come and get a camera and that kind of thing. Things that would impact that stuff, I think, would be very important to get out there as much as you can. I don't know if these meetings actually get out to anyone, but in one way or other to publicize, yeah, we got, you know, now UPTV has 3 drones, you know, coming.
We don't have drones.
Oh, well.
Yet.
That's right. Something along those lines to remind people of the resource that they have here.
No, those are good points. And I think, I mean, we'd be happy to present the good news on a quarterly meeting basis. The last thing, and this, I really put this in the packet just because we had these conversations last time, which was what is the stated requirements of the UPTV Commission. So I provided the text from, I provided the text, and I love having a sounding board, and I love having people who are willing to be part of this. And I'll speak directly to the UPTV audience that we still need volunteers to serve as additional commissioners. So people who are watching UPTV or probably enjoy UPTV, you can be part of the solution and, you know, continue to provide some assistance in various ways. But ultimately, the duties of the UPTV Commission are relatively narrow. And it really specifically was to hear complaints from community producers who felt that the city's staff was not handling their content in an appropriate manner or declined to show it or whatever, that you would be the body that would hear those complaints. And as we talked about last time, the only complaints we've really seen, at least in my almost 9 years here, are about content that is being shown on UPTV in accordance with UPTV policies, but that members of the public, there were 2 different times where they complained about the content. And, you know, and that is an additional responsibility that the commission can take on. But I guess this is more of an open-ended. There is the opportunity for us to take on officially other duties for the commission. If anybody had good suggestions about what we should put on the list, whereas mostly what I'm proposing is taking stuff off the list.
I remember going through those conversations, and they took a lot of back and forth about adding and removing items from the, and there was legal stuff involved, and I think it makes a lot more sense to go through the other parts of these future what the path is conversations informally, before we worry too much about what's in the code and ordinances. And then once we've figured out what we think the path forward is, then we can say, all right, well, what of that do we want to have be code, and what do we want to just be non-required practice? I could definitely imagine, preservation of the history of video content in Urbana. That could be a mission of this commission. Then it could start to creep outside of just the UPTV archives. I don't know if that would be good or bad, but it would be something. And just now, I'm tying that in with the 2 other topics that you talked about. So, one was bringing content on and playing it on the station, and the other is the archives. I could see a value in anything that you guys play on the station becomes part of the long-term UPTV archive, that then 50 years from now people can look at what, people who still had physical incarnations did with when they were, bored, I guess. So anyway, that maybe went a little bit out of left field. Mark?
It's dangerous to speak while you're still putting your thoughts together. I'm not a fan of mission creep, but we do have to acknowledge that times change, and there might be different missions for the commission to take on that aren't in the ordinance. I would think that it would be a several meeting process to discuss which things are mission critical to the commission, what things are being done by other entities that we don't need to worry about, and what is busy work that none of us want. I guess if the only reason for the commission, as far as the ordinance goes, the only reason for the commission to exist is to take citizen complaints about content, I don't know how many meetings this commission would have. But I think a commission to steer and to guide UPTV is a good thing. I'm definitely interested to hear more discussion, and maybe as meetings go forward, continue to refine our mission in light of the world in 2022.
Okay. Well, and this can be an ongoing discussion as well. So some of these things I just put out there so that we can start to have this as a unfinished business.
That's the last item on our official agenda. The next is commissioners' comments, so I'll open up the forum to our two other commissioners who are here, if they'd like to.
I would like to echo Sanford's comments from a few moments ago. If anybody lives in Urbana that is interested in technology, interested in communications, interested in broadcasting, interested in audiovisual, if you are interested in it, and if you have experience in it, please contact Urbana City Hall and ask to speak to Sanford or the city clerk and offer your services to be on the commission. We meet quarterly for 1 hour, so it's 4 hours out of your year. This is public access, public television. UPTV is a vital component for the community here. And any Urbana residents, please, if you have interest, background, or talents in communication in whatever form, please give City Hall a call and express your interest in being on the UPTV Commission.
I'll note for ease of communication that the email address uptv@urbanaillinois.us would be the best way to contact us. uptv@urbanaillinois.us.
I'm happy to be here as far as guiding the direction and what we're doing in the future. It's my first meeting, so hopefully we'll get a little bit deeper into that as we have subsequent meetings. One thing I would like, I know we have some limited analytics on the live stream and on the YouTube feeds. I'd love to be able to get some additional analytics back somehow from the cable content providers so that we can see what people are currently watching, so we can tailor content more towards where the needs are.
Okay, we'll have to explore what's available. That's good.
And I'll leave off my comments for today, so save them for next time. There being no other items on the agenda, I'll announce that the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Urbana Public Television Commission is December 9th at noon in these Urbana City Council chambers. There's a huge amount of really tasty food in the back, so if I'm just kidding. It's actually not. So if anyone wants to come to the audience, they can. And I'll call this meeting adjourned.